Green Bay Packers going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this team in 2021. So obviously 30-3 last year, really, really good team. Kind of hit the same ceiling they have for a couple seasons as far as the NFC Championship game and running into some buzzsaws on their way to the Super Bowl. But still, during the regular season, a very good team, obviously a really, really good offense, and there are very obvious and clear reasons for why that probably will continue. So as far as my betting record on them last year, this, I believe, was the worst team in the entire NFL that I did. And why did that happen? Well, this happened to be the team where I learned the very, very valuable lesson about how weather impacts football games. Obviously, this being my first full year doing all this, or last year being, and overall, obviously still super, super positive. But on this team specifically, with the weather in Green Bay and some other times, like I believe in Cleveland, they had a game like that and stuff like that. You learn real quick that stuff does matter and is something that you need to pay attention to. And that's going to be your reminder, kind of I'm going to think about in general as the season goes on. It is really is important to pay attention to that stuff for the purposes of like over-unders. And just it's hard to cover large spreads when shit's going crazy outside. So again, the strong bets are the only ones that you're ever making anyway. Should be only ever making anyway. So it's not like you're really losing money at this point. But that's definitely something to keep in mind with why this record is so bad. But as far as this team, that's what we're here to talk about, right? So offseason losses, really just a couple big ones being Corey Linsley, who's outstanding as a center, is maybe the best center in the NFL, pretty close, who moves on to the Chargers, and Ricky Wagner, who very underrated as like a guy who should be starting for an NFL team at tackle that they were lucky to have last year, given that they weren't planning on starting him at the beginning of the year. Other than that, though, I'm just kind of filling out the list. Steven Austin literally barely played, didn't play, I don't think. Jamal Williams is a backup running back. It doesn't matter. He's fun. Actually, he's pretty decent, but whatever. Lane Taylor, actually a starting level guard, I would argue, but he's been hurt the last 2 years. I think maybe he's played like 1 or 2 games. So, whatever. Defensively, again, Christian Kirksey, is like a replacement level linebacker. They're not going to miss him really. Raven Green was one of this big group of backup safeties. Doesn't matter. Damon Harrison, again, didn't even play, just kind of filling out the list of names here. As far as additions, those two on the left, boy, do they matter. And we'll talk about why, but those are huge, huge deals. Dennis Kelly is really good. Like really, really good. Absolutely, I can't imagine won't be starting for this team. And Randall Cobb, people roast the trade or whatever because the circumstances surrounding it are funny. But in reality, Randall Cobb is still like a really good NFL receiver who's actively going to help this team and do a bunch of positive things that they were straight up missing without him on the roster. On defense, Devondre Campbell's not very good. That doesn't help. There's still real issues on the defensive side of the ball for this team, but they're onto something here as a roster. Draft class, we'll talk about rookies once they play in the NFL. Until then, not much use, I don't think, in creating judgments about how good or bad they might be. But yeah, that is the draft class of this team. So now we get to talk about all the positions, position by position, talk about what the player is or can be, will be for the 2021 season. With these slides on the top right, that's the total number of players at the position, and the number on the right of the name is where that player ranks out of those spots. So Aaron Rodgers, best quarterback in the NFL for my money. He is effectively tied with Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson. I talked about that in my last video with the Seahawks. But he does positive things every single play, and he combines almost every single play, and he combines that with 95% of the high-end stuff that Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes do, with a fairly significant amount less of the bad stuff. So, yeah, best quarterback in the NFL, I would argue pretty comfortably, actually, although, it's very close, but I think he's number one pretty inarguably. Really, really good. He's still going to kill people this year. The end. Running back, again, you have a running back, actually. So I talk about this with the running back slides most of the time, that very few running backs matter. It's only like 3 or 4 or 5. Maybe that's a couple more. Aaron Jones is right on the borderline of like actually being a guy who legitimately can cause your offense to be good and not just be the beneficiary of it. Now, he happens to be the beneficiary of a system and offense that is very good, but you can clearly see the things that he specifically is adding at times. And Aaron Jones is absolutely one of the best running backs in football. Really, really good. A.J. Dillon as a backup, he showed some things in the few games he played at the end of last year that he might matter. I would argue he's kind of already better than a player like Jonathan Taylor, just had a lot less. Better is maybe strong, but very similar just a lot less snaps in terms of a guy who is going to use the space created for him in the offense very well. Which, how valuable is that? But as far as running backs go, he's actually pretty good. Past those two, it's running back depth or whatever. I don't really care. Dexter Williams was not very good when he played. Very few snaps, I believe, maybe 2 years ago at this point. But yeah, then wide receivers. So this is still potentially an issue, but I think it's fascinating to talk about with the Packers. So Devontae Adams is the best receiver in football. That is there's no real way to argue that. He is open every play, all the time, on every level of the field, and with such like immediacy to the snap of the ball that he even if he didn't play with Aaron Rodgers, creates such a giant floor for how good your offense is going to be, very similar to like a Stephon Diggs, that he's literally invaluable, best receiver in the NFL. Past him, though, I want to talk about Randall Cobb more. Randall Cobb, right, spent the last 2 years in the Cowboys and the Texans in weird situations with kind of weird offenses. 2 years ago on the Cowboys, he was still very good in terms of being a player out of the slot, and this still applies to the Texans last year anyway, but I just, production-wise, he was better 2 years ago. But he's still a player who, out of the slot, is going to consistently beat defenders, like consistently. He still understands and reads defenses very well. He finds space very well. He's actually still pretty good after the catch. He's not like he's slowed down from where he was when he was like young, but he's not slow at all. And overall, he's a really valuable player. And specifically, he provides a skill set that the Packers just completely lacked outside of Devontae Adams that really hurts their offense because they were leaning on guys like Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Allen Lazard, who we'll talk about in a second, to do things that they are pretty much incapable of. And when you flip that and take those assignments and responsibilities and put them on a Randall Cobb, you're going to get a guy who Aaron Rodgers is going to look at all the time and be like, that's something I can actually use on this play. Like I can actually throw the ball there. And it's a really big deal. It's a really, really big deal. So there are other receivers. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I still have listed as a starter. He's bad. He's really, really bad. His only skill is being kind of fast and big. And while he does track the ball like down the field, any production almost universally that he has would be replaced by any other receiver in the NFL. I don't hate the guy. He's just not good at playing wide receiver. Allen Lazard actually is kind of okay at it. No, he still kind of falls into the thing of like how much production is actually him being useful or is just him happening to be the guy who is running the routes in the Packers offense. And a large majority, I can answer that, a large majority is still the second part. But he can do some things as far as using his body to create space. Actually, he's not a horrible route runner. Like, he if he's on the field, is plenty useful enough to justify it. So I don't want to roast him too bad. Equinemi St. Brown has barely played. I would maybe even argue for him still being unranked, to be honest with you. But he's not a guy who anything he's done on the field gives me reason to like care. Amari Rodgers, so he's also important. He potentially, granted he's a fourth-round rookie, I believe, fifth round maybe, potentially provides backup or a competition with that Randall Cobb role as far as a guy who can actually do things underneath and not suck at it, which is important. I mean, the more of those types of guys in the modern NFL you have, the better. And proofing your offense from injuries is really important, and he helps with that a lot. Only other guy I want to talk about here is Devin Funchess. Hasn't obviously opted out last year, the COVID year, which, we'll see what happens if he even plays this year. If he does, though, frankly, that guy, he's not that bad. He is clearly smart enough to understand defenses, not in the same way that Randall Cobb does, but in that sort of vein. And he's not like impossibly slow the way that like a guy like Marquez Valdes-Scantling is laterally. And so I do think he would get along well with Aaron Rodgers. Is he going to play? Is he going to make the team? Whatever, I have no idea. But he actually, at least, I don't think would suck if he was forced onto the field. At tight end, they're still struggling there. Robert Tonyan had some touchdowns last year. He's not like the worst thing in the world, obviously. He's, again, I've mentioned with the Packers a couple times here, if he's the guy running those routes in your offense, as long as you have the like high-end pieces around him, you're going to be fine. But as far as what he actually provides and adds to your offense compared to other tight ends around the NFL, it's borderline nothing. He's not really an above average blocker. He doesn't move super well in space. He's not actually creating space as a route runner or as a receiver very often. And while he does, I will mention, he does have strong hands, which is important and does help. He's not a guy I really care about. Other than him, Mercedes Lewis is just a blocker at this point. Not too much else to talk about. Jay Sternberger, guy people have been excited about for years. Finally he missed this over here. I believe he should probably be unranked, to be honest with you. Only played a little bit last year. He's, I was not impressed at all by the snaps he actually played. Granted, it's a very small sample size. But yeah, no, I just don't really see with him, although I want to hold off too much judgment until he actually plays. Josiah DeGara, third round rookie last year, fullback more than a tight end. He actually, I thought, was pretty decent at what they were asking him to do when he was playing, hence why he's ranked here. Now, granted, again, that was a very small amount of games. Maybe it was 3 games, 4 games, something like that. When he was on the field, though, I did think he was okay. Past that, Dominic Daphne did end up playing a little bit for them at the end of the year, but nothing I really care about. Offensive line, they're still really good here. And this is the thing with this offense and why I'm so unconcerned with the concept of the Packers being one of the best teams in the NFC again. I think it's pretty much guaranteed because I just look at this, right? Like, David Bakhtiari is almost perfect as a pass protector, incredible as a run blocker. And while he is injured and might miss a little bit at the time at the beginning of the year, he'll be back for the important stuff. And B, frankly, they're deep enough that I'm concerned, but I'm not like terrified as I would be about some other teams. Mostly because right before making this video a couple of days ago, they signed Dennis Kelly, a guy who maybe people forgot about because he's sitting in free agency for such a long time. But he's awesome. He's been one of the Titans' best linemen for years. Stepped in for an injury for them too a couple of years ago. He is absolutely worth starting. I know he's ranked 34th, but there's not. Only 32 tackles. Remember, that's every tackle in the NFL, not just left or right tackles. So he's 100% worth starting. He's actually a positive player. He's pretty good in pass protection. He's absolutely going to be useful for them as a run blocker. I can't say enough good things about Dennis Kelly. So that signing was crazy good. And past that, they have Billy Turner too. Billy Turner, player I came around on a little bit last year. I didn't expect him to be able to perform a tackle, and I still think he definitely has issues there and will be the wink link on this line if he starts at tackle. He's not horrible. Like, you can live with him pretty fine, and as a run blocker, he's really good actually still. So you have depth, meaningfully good depth there. 3 starting level tackles. At guard, you have Elton Jenkins, one of the best guards in the NFL. Great mover in space, clearly knows what he's doing, good pass protector, still has a penchant for losing a little bit, but hey, so does every other lineman in the NFL. You have Lucas Patrick, a guy who stepped into starts again last year and a little bit the year before, who showed he's the next in this long line of, just really good, a little bit unheralded offensive lineman for the Packers. He's no real weaknesses, a little bit weak in run blocking, but that's okay, especially the offense they plan. And past that, they have some guys, John Runyon, especially, who have played a few snaps who, weren't too bad. And while he's still unranked, they really do got something here. The one issue is at the center position. There have been pretty good reviews about Josh Myers so far in camp. I'm not going to read into that really at all. He's just a rookie. We'll see again once he actually plays. But he's a second round rookie. And generally, it's hard to suck enough at center to hurt your team too much anyway. And I'm not going to put that on him until he shows me that he's like that. And again, if he doesn't start, they have enough options in terms of Elton Jenkins. Actually, I think played center in college at Mississippi State. They can move him around, start on they have a bunch of options. They have meaningfully good depth, and while it's not injury proof, it more or less is in comparison to almost every other NFL team. So awesome there. The offense as a whole, again, is going to be dominant. I can effectively guarantee you. You have Aaron Rodgers behind a still good to really good, once David Bakhtiari's healthy, offensive line in a really positive system. with the best receiver in the NFL in Devontae Adams, and actually better than last year in terms of the supporting cast of Randall Cobb, who again really makes a difference. Allen Lazard being fully healthy and integrated in the offense, potentially Amari Rodgers. Like, they're gonna kill people still. They really are. There's no two ways about it. It would require an injury to Aaron Rodgers for this offense to not be elite, which goes without saying. I mean, just look at the history of the team. I don't want to talk about it too much, but yeah, I like, you got to ask yourself, right? Because you want to temper expectations or look for edges you can have as far as betting, and what can cause this offense issues, and it's just the truth is. There's no specific weakness that you can point to outside of, again, maybe like a Chris Jones type, the Chiefs defensive tackle, if Josh Myers really is that bad at center. But that's like not that big of a weakness, and B, the likelihood of that being so bad it's detrimental to the offense as a whole really is not high. So yeah, elite offense is just not too much to talk about. The defense, definitely more interesting and definitely more flawed, but still own strengths and weaknesses. So defensive line, I'm going to get Kenny Clark out of the way first. Kenny Clark is an elite player. He's a nose tackle who actually can rush the passer at times. Not like he's not amazing at it, but he does matter a little bit. He's super, super good as a run defender. He consistently moves the offensive lineman. He's not just a big fat guy. He actually gets in the backfield. He actually makes plays. Dude goes crazy. Other than him, though, there's literally no other player that I'm excited about here except for maybe Kingsley Keke. They're still starting this pair of defensive tackles in Dean Lowry and Tyler Lancaster, who are the same player effectively as far as a big three technique who does nothing. Like neither of them get in the backfield almost ever. Dean Lowry is clearly the better of the two, and he at least, I guess, you can justify having him in your like defensive line rotation. But not as a full-time starter, Jesus. And neither of them provide any pass rush at all. Like, that's tough. That's really, really tough. That's why I mentioned with Kingsley Keke, he's the only one outside of the Kenny Clark that I even care about at all, because he has shown that he at least has the juice to do some things as a player who makes plays. And now, obviously, there's other valuable things about being a defensive lineman in terms of eating up space and that type of stuff. But that's not guaranteed. Just because you don't do the penetration stuff doesn't mean you do that type of thing. And that's the problem with Dean Lowry and Tyler Lancaster. They just don't do anything. But yeah, Kingsley Keke, at least maybe, he can get in the backfield a little bit. He's not bad. And then you have a bunch of like undrafted rookies, or Terrell Slayton, or TJ Slayton, whichever he goes by. He's, I think, their third rounder, and maybe he'll be something. They kind of need him to be, but we'll see. At edge, that they're still fine. So Darius Smith is a borderline elite player, really, really good still. He's a guy who rushed the passer, is almost dominant against the run. He's awesome. Preston Smith, he had his good first year with the Packers, buoyed by a really good defense, or pretty good defense around him. Now his weaknesses have kind of shown up more as far as not really being a meaningful pass rusher. He doesn't suck at it. He's okay. He's still a decent edge defender, though. He can play the run fine. Like, he's probably worth starting. And Rashawn Gary, I will grant Packers fans, who I know really like him given what he did at the end of last year, he did come around a little bit. Now he's not somebody like that. I'm still I'm not like, oh sweet, I get to have Rashawn Gary on the field for my defense. Like, I'm not nearly to that point yet. But compared to what I was this time last year, I was like, he's effectively a waste. I definitely don't think that anymore. And he, especially as a pass rusher, can provide some meaningful snaps on, third and long, stuff like that teams do need. So, you have a little bit of something in him. But again, I don't want to overrate him because he's not great. So, yeah, at edge, with the high end of Darius Smith plus the pretty decent floor of Preston Smith, like, you're going to be fine. Linebacker, I don't know. They suck. They have sucked for years. Didn't change here. Kamal Martin, actually the one I want to talk about first. He did show some things in his playing time in the middle end of last year to make you're not like excited about him, especially not as like a starter if he even does start. But it was enough to say, okay, He's worth paying attention to and might matter defensively. Other than him, though, I mean, Devondre Campbell is just not a modern NFL linebacker. He's too slow sideline to sideline. He's not good in like pass coverage, even remotely. He is not. He's actually pretty similar to Blake Martinez, player that just left a couple of years ago, who actively was hurting them a lot of the time. Now he's a little bit better. He's not so unbelievably slow, but he's not good. Then you have Chris Barnes. He stepped up admirably at times during their run last year. Started playoff games and stuff like that. And he's not the end of the world, but again, he's a. They just for some reason they have this type with just really, really non-NFL level athletes at linebacker who do some things as far as like run fits in the box go, but that's such an unvaluable thing that it starts you start to wonder about what they're really looking for and why in linebackers. But yeah, Chris Barnes again, you're not like screwed if he's on the field, but it's not good. Ty Summers, you are screwed if he's on the field. He's one of the absolute worst players in football. That guy, oh my God, should not touch an NFL field. Past them, though, Oren Burks never worked out as a decently in third or fourth round. I don't remember exactly. But yeah, no, this is still a position of concern for them, and it's going to end up costing them at times too, just like it has for years. So then we have corners. This is another one, actually. I think that's kind of fun to talk about. Similar to how Devontae Adams, they have the number one receiver in the NFL. Jay Alexander, number one corner in the NFL. Now, this is a lot closer than the receiver thing is. He's more of like a tie at the top with 3-4 other guys. But what's unique about Jay Alexander and why he's so good, why I think he's number one, is that he actually is good enough to limit the elite type of receivers that truly drive offense on the other side of the ball. Example being Devontae Adams, and I talked about Stephon Diggs earlier. If I had to pick someone in the NFL to cover those guys, it would be Jay Alexander, with Tre'Davious White probably being a fairly close second. But that's really big because he's like the only guy who can. He's like Devontae Adams on the other side of the ball. I don't know if any other player could really meaningfully impact what he's going to do to a game outside of Jay Alexander and maybe Tre'Davious White. So, yeah, Jay Alexander is super valuable, almost matchup proof. He causes any he's just limiting to the opposing offense no matter what. On the other side of the ball, or other side of this field, I actually don't think they're nearly as bad of a shape as they've been made out to be, especially with bringing back Kevin King. Listen, I understand why Packers fans hate Kevin King. Obviously, the end of the play or the end of halftime against the Buccaneers really hurt, and he, as a first-round pick, definitely hasn't lived up to that. But I said people should go a little easy on him. As far as these like big, lanky outside corners go, he's one of the better ones, as opposed to like the guys on the Seahawks, like Trey Flowers, stuff like that, Shaquille Griffin, stuff like that. Like Kevin King is not that bad. He doesn't get burned that often unless he's playing, really good receivers, in which case I don't know what to tell you. Every corner does. He can do some things. Like I'm fine with him starting again this year. Then they have Josh Jackson, who played some in the like beginning, middle part of the year last year, who also can play. He's not ideal or anything, but he's not going to get burned when he's out there with any level of consistency. And he actually, that helps your team as far as a corner goes. Then they draft the first rounder again, Eric Stokes, who, rookie, who knows, but like they're probably going to be okay at corner here, which is important to remember. And in the slot, Shannon Sullivan, he's not ideal. I do think he actually has pretty good zone instincts. Notably, he has some plays where you're like, you know what, I get why he's on the field. But, he's not ideal, not a good man coverage player necessarily. At safety, still really good. Adrian Amos, this maybe safe, one of the safest safeties in the league. He has that reputation for a reason. He really knows what he's doing. He actually really helps, I would argue, even maybe more so than pass coverage in run defense, because when they play teams like the 49ers or whatever, he's a huge part in why, despite their bad run defense ahead of him, they can limit some stuff because he actually is going to stay in position down the field. Darnell Savage, he's a playmaker. He's pretty good. He actually is kind of okay in like even man coverage against tight ends, which is definitely a valuable thing. He can make plays against the run game. Why he's a little bit lower in the safety rankings, he just still kind of takes a few too many chances, and I don't think he's ideal as like a downfield coverage player, but pretty good. After that, though, I get worried because I talked about the slot stuff on the last slide, how the play chains a little bit there, but they'll also a lot of times play three safeties, which means they're bringing in one of Henry Black or Vernon Scott or Will Redmond. That concerns me. Those guys, when they've been on the field, have not been good. Henry Black may be probably the best of the three, but that's a very small sample size and not an impressive one. Will Redmond was horrible. I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to remember the long, crazy Alvin Kamara touchdown in the Saints-Packers game last year. That was almost strictly because of Will Redmond being a horrible, horrible tackler. And that is concerning. That is maybe the most concerning thing about this defense. So, yeah, the defense as a whole. I mean, they're going to have their flaws, and there are going to be things that hurt them. But because of how good their offense is, it's pretty easy to say their defense is going to be, good enough. As a run defense, when you have Kenny Clark to build around, you're going to be probably okay. And with those edge defenders, it's not ideal. Their linebackers are going to get them hurt a lot of times, as well as their other non-meaningful defensive tackles aren't Kenny Clark. But, there are worse things to be worse at. So it's whatever. And then as far as pass defense goes, again, they're not going to be good, but they're definitely not going to be that bad. You have some okay pass rushers, Kenny Clark, Darius Smith. Like, you have the best corner in football. You have good safeties. Your defensive scheme is actually okay. Like, they're going to be fine defensively. And fine isn't always exactly what you want. Combined with how good this offense is going to be, it'll be more than enough. So looking ahead at the schedule, just kind of in general. And, so, I mean, offensively, I'm very confident that they're effectively matchup proof, so I'm not really looking at anything like that. Defensively, I'm still a little bit worried about teams that can run the ball really well for sure. And that'll come up in their schedule, but that's not like that crazy thing with how good their pass offense is. It's like, so really you're just kind of looking at, it's really the high level teams that this team could just struggle to beat because every team does. And really outside of maybe the 49ers in week 3, but who are still probably going to be playing like a bad quarterback at that point. Like you got to wait until week 9 where they play the Chiefs, Seahawks, Vikings, Rams. Like that stretch is definitely hard, but like, listen, they catch a bad Saints team off the bat. They catch a bad Lions team. They catch a 49ers team, which either going to have bad Jimmy Garoppolo or very young rookie Trey Lance. That could be tough, I guess. The Steelers are actually probably going to be okay, but then it's the bad Bengals, bad Bears. Like, this team is going to be really good again, especially in the regular season. They're going to be a fucking steamroller all the way up until at least the middle of the season. And as far as a roster goes, they're fairly injury proof as much as you can be in the NFL. So, yeah, this team, they still gonna kill people. That's just how it is. Is their ceiling Super Bowl? I would argue, yeah, pretty comfortably. Especially telling you the Randall Cobb thing is a really big deal. But yeah, so this team, Packers, 2021, they're gonna be really good again.